Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and today is the 8th and final video in a series where we talk about cards we really want to see reprinted in Modern Masters 2017. If you've been watching the series, you know we've hit all the colors of the color pie. We did an episode on multicolor, and then yesterday we did colorless spells. Today we're going to wrap things up with the lands, and lands are tricky. There's a lot of great lands out there, and then you have to decide, are you looking for utility lands to be reprinted? Are you looking for mana fixing cycles? Well, we're going to talk about it all here today. And granted, there's a lot of lands we're going to discuss, and we know there's not going to be nearly enough room for them all in the set. So these are just lands that at some point I would like to see reprinted. If some of them show up in Modern Masters 2017, wonderful. But if they don't, then we hopefully will see them in another release coming up in the future. Quickly before we get started though, if you check out the description below, you'll find some links to our Amazon affiliate store. If you make any purchases through any of those links, a small percentage will come back to help support the channel. It's always appreciated. I want to take a moment to thank everybody who's pre-ordered their Modern Masters booster boxes through those links. That helps us so much. I can't even begin to tell you. And if you haven't yet pre-ordered and you're interested in it, there's still really good deals on there. You can still pick up these booster boxes for $180 to $185, which is crazy for a set like this and pretty much unheard of compared to past releases. So even if you don't pick them up there and you're thinking of picking them up, you probably want to do it sooner than later. Also, you'll find links to our Patreon page and other places where you can support us, and there's details there as to how to get a copy of this Angel token that you see on the screen, which is a Heroes and Legends exclusive classic art token. Okay, let's get started with a pair of lands that are actually utility lands, not mana fixing, but I want to kind of get them out of the way. Those are the Nexus lands. You're probably pretty familiar with them. You see Blink Moth Nexus here and Ink Moth Nexus. So, Blink Moth got a reprint in Modern Masters 2015, which has helped keep the value of this reasonable. $4.27 is not really a card we desperately need a reprint of, but it does see a lot of play still. Ink Moth Nexus, much more expensive at $23.84. That would be a much more welcome reprint. The problem with reprinting Ink Moth, though, is it has the Infect ability on it. So, that makes things a little bit tricky, because if you're building a set around a limited format, then you're probably not going to just shoehorn this in unless you have an Infect theme in there. And putting an Infect theme into a limited set is not easy to do. It's very easy to make that unbalanced. And a set as important as Modern Masters 2017, I wouldn't be surprised if developers just plain shy away from Infect because they don't want to mess up the limited game. And if that's the case, that makes Ink Moth kind of difficult to reprint, right? And a little bit of an odd man out. So, I don't know. It probably won't be in this Modern Masters, but at some point down the line, it would be nice to see a reprint of this card. Alright, let's talk about Tron Lands. Now, currently these aren't super expensive. If you look at the pricing based off the most recent printing in 9th edition, you can get each of these for under $4. However, they're still uncommons. Feels a little pricey for an uncommon. And let's face it, Tron is very, very popular in the meta. It's a fun deck to play. There's a lot of new variants coming out all the time. We just recently have seen Eldrazi Tron. The decks and the cards that go along with Tron decks are increasingly going up in value. So you have to think about, if you don't print these cards and you wait maybe another couple of years, at what point do these cards start hitting the $6, $7, $8 mark? And that becomes very expensive considering you want to pick up play sets to play Tron, and these are at heart uncommon cards, right? So here's the tricky part though about reprinting these. Working them into your limited game can be difficult. Now, in today's Magic, there's a lot of people that will be drafting Modern Masters, so you'd probably want to put these at the common level. Give someone a chance to get one of each of the three, perhaps. And even that is not super consistent in a limited deck, right? And you also have to have a good payout for these lands. You have to have some sort of card that is going to be a worthwhile spell to run that's maybe a big colorless investment. And at what rarity does that fit into, right? You don't want those to be mythic. Maybe rare would be okay for a few of those, but you'd want something at uncommon to be a good payoff. It all of a sudden becomes pretty hard to develop around these cards, right? So again, because of that, I don't know if we'll see these in Modern Masters 2017, but hopefully again, they do show up somewhere at some point soon. Alright, we're going to move on to some 5-color cycles of lands. We're going to start off with the tribal lands from Lorwyn. Now, a couple things I will point out before we go right into these tribal lands. There's a good chance, as far as rare land cycles go, that we'll probably see a cycle of 5 in Modern Masters 2017 as opposed to a cycle of 10. I don't really see, for limited purposes, Wizards feeling comfortable throwing 10 lands in the rare spot, especially in a set like this, and you might get a little bit of land fatigue after a while, depending on which cycle they put in, right? So we're going to talk about that a little more in detail in a few minutes. But right now I wanted to focus on these 5-color land cycles, one of which being tribal lands from Lorwyn. Now this could be something they choose to put in there. There's some hits and misses here though. I mean, obviously Giltleaf Palace, the best one, being right now $14.50 because it works great with elves. There's some other decent ones. I mean, you have Wanderwine Hub, which is great because of merfolk, $7.28. But you got some misses here too, like Ancient Amphitheater right now is worth 79 cents. So you could put this in as a cycle of 5. However, you don't need to. I mean, you could just simply put Giltleaf Palace in and have an elf theme in your limited game and just forget about the other 4. Or you could put the Wanderwine Hub in and do a merfolk theme. So you don't necessarily have to put all these in there, and these could actually be a complement to another cycle of 5 that you already have in there. And that is very possible because, at least from this point, what we've seen from the 3 cards that we already know will be in the set, 2 of them are multicolor and 1 is a heavy monocolor card, which makes me feel like for the limited game, there's going to be a ton of mana fixing. Now, granted, it could be like what we've seen in the past where there's just a bunch of crew lands at uncommon, which is fine. I mean, that helps you play the game. It might not be any high value lands necessarily in all cases, but it makes me feel like we're at least going to get a cycle of 5 rare lands that help with mana fixing. Probably a cycle of 10 at uncommon, which might not be valuable lands, but necessary, and then a lot of fixing at common. And those could be more lands that are cheap, or they could simply be artifact fixing. But if that's the case, I mean, this is a way to creatively maybe add a couple more lands without going for a full cycle of 10. Creature lands. Now, these are kind of an obvious set of 5 lands from Worldwake. This cycle was recently completed in the more recent Battle for Zendikar block. Of course, those aren't eligible to be in the set, but let's look at the 5 that are. Now, out of these 5, again, there's some hits and misses here. I mean, Celestial Colonnade is fantastic. I mean, that's the one everyone really wants to see reprinted at $23.99 right now. But Creeping Tar Pit's good at $17.69, even Raging Ravine at $14.24. But you got some misses there too, like Lava Claw Reaches $1.90. Stirring Wildwood $1.80. I mean, they're fine, but they're not super great. In fact, the Wildwood was reprinted in the Dual deck not too long ago. So you could argue that not all of these need reprints, but I mean, they would be an okay cycle of 5 if you were to include them as your rare cycle. Or perhaps you just pick and choose. Maybe you just get the more sought after cards in there, and that would be fine too. Alright, our next 5-color cycle is Fastlands. There's been a lot of attention on these recently due to the fact that the cycle was completed in the Kaladesh block, but the original 5 came to us from Scars of Meriden. And here they are. So, some decent cards here. I mean, Blackleaf Cliffs, $18.10, Copperline Gorge, $12.36. Now, the other 3 are under $10, but really just barely under $10 for a couple of them. So, value-wise, this is actually a pretty nice cycle, and I think fans would be happy to get more copies of these particular ones, so this might not be a horrible choice to put in there as your rare cycle at all. Alright, the elephant in the room, we gotta talk about it. Fetch lands. Are the fetch lands going to show up? Well, a couple things to point out. First off, let's talk about the allied color fetch lands. Technically, they are not eligible for the set, which seems kind of funny because they were originally printed in Onslaught, which is not an eligible set for Modern Masters, or for Modern for that case, and they were reprinted in Khans of Tarkir, which made them Modern legal, but Khans of Tarkir, technically not a set that is going to be allowed in Modern Masters 2017. It's too new. So, because of that, that leaves the enemy colored fetch lands. Now, you know what? That's just fine with a lot of people because those are the ones we all want, right? Look at these prices. I mean, they're ridiculous. Now, I will say the allied color fetch lands steadily going up. Even though they had a huge print run in Khans of Tarkir, they're still running $10 to $15. I mean, that's pretty crazy when you think about it. These, though, these enemy fetch lands from the original Zendikar are completely out of hand. Arid Mesa, $52.68. Marsh Flats, $39.46. Misty Rainforest, $51.35. Scalding Tarn, $78.15. Verdant Catacomb, $67.97. That's just simply ridiculous. All right, so these need a reprint. We all know they need a reprint. The question is, when is this going to happen? Could it happen in Modern Masters 2015? Well, In one case, it might because, again, like I said, I have a theory that we're going to see a cycle of 5 in the rare spot and not a cycle of 10. If that's the case, wow, these would be huge candidates to get in there and definitely sell some packs. And if anytime these are spoiled, trust me, those $180 boxes aren't going to be $180 anymore. So that would really bring a lot of excitement to the set. And maybe that's what they're going to tease us with early next week. I don't know. Maybe. Here's the downside to that, though, if that's the case. I think most players would rather see these reprinted in a standard release in the future, because that means there's going to be more copies than if they're reprinted in a Modern Masters release. And that's where things get awkward. I mean, yes, you want them reprinted and you want them sooner than later, because these price tags are just out of control, really, at this point for what these cards are. But at the same time, if you get them too soon, if you get them at Modern Masters, it might not impact the price enough, especially in the long term, for that to make a big enough difference when it comes to these cards, considering the demand that's on them right now. And that feels a little strange to me. So maybe the better option is you get them in a future standard set. You do have to ask yourself the question, though, is Wizards comfortable with that? Because we saw what happened when they printed the allied ones in standard. And standard, for at least a short period of time, became all about these fetch lands and taking extra time to shuffle in tournaments, and you saw a lot of 4-color decks. And as far as keeping colors of decks restricted or down, it didn't do that at all, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I don't know if Wizards was comfortable with where it brought the meta for standard. So will they repeat that with these someday? Maybe if they find the right set and they're comfortable just keeping them around for a couple of years and it is what it is sort of thing. But at the same time, they may have felt like they don't want to do that. And if that's the case, then this set, Modern Masters, makes more sense for these things to come back in. So it's kind of hard to read their mind and get into their mindset. But I guess that's the at least theory that I have, that maybe they'll show up, maybe they won't. If they do, though, it's going to be a big impact. All right, let's talk about some 10 land cycles. Now, I mentioned I don't think we'll be seeing 10 land cycles, but I wanted to bring up a few of them just that have some decent price tags attached to them that could be interesting if they did decide to go in this direction. We're going to start off with Pain Lands. Maybe these are the least exciting of all of them, but let's bring them up real quick. And okay, here they are. I mean, recent art on these that they've adjusted over the years actually looks pretty amazing. But let's look at some values of these. Not super exciting. I mean, there's some good ones here. Brushland being one of the most exciting because it's seeing a lot of playing like Bant Eldrazi and stuff. But $15.99, that's pretty good. Adakar Waste at $9.91 is pretty good. And Carplusion Forest at $7.25 is pretty good. But now we're starting to get lower to the $5, $6 and less mark. It becomes less exciting, especially if these were at rare. Now, you could argue that they don't necessarily have to be a rare. Maybe you make these your uncommon cycle. It wouldn't crash the market, really, because, like I said, other than Brushland, these aren't super expensive or anything like that. They've seen numerous printings, and they would be really good for fixing in your limited game, and they're actually playable in other formats. That would actually be kind of awesome, I think. Would they do that and kind of crash these lands into an uncommon spot? I don't know, maybe. Maybe because it is a limited release, they'd be comfortable doing it in a case like this, especially if they were really desperate for fixing. And they do want to showcase a lot of Ravnica cards, I have no doubt, which will be multicolor. So, who knows? This is very possible, I think. Shock Lands. Alright, Shock Lands may be a little less possible for a concept like that, just because there's one thing going for Shock Lands for getting in the set, and that's the fact that they are a great way to showcase Ravnica. Ravnica is a tough block, or at least the Return to Ravnica block, I should say, is a tough block to showcase because value-wise, there's not a lot of value there. There's some great cards. You think of things like Abrupt Decay, a lot of the cards we talked about this week, but there's not a big price tag on a lot of them. So if you really wanted to kind of give that punch to the set and make it feel like you're including Return to Ravnica, well, Shock Lands could be a way to go. But we kind of know we're going to be going back to Ravnica at some point, probably in the not too distant future, right? And it almost feels like maybe they'll want to save Shock Lands to just bring back as a Ravnica thing. And that's cool too, I guess. Price-wise on Shocklands, I'll bring them up here. They're staying pretty stable. I mean, they're not getting out of control, which is nice because so many were printed. Now, you will notice, even though there was a huge print run on the Return to Ravnica block, the Return to Ravnica set itself actually had a bigger print run than Gatecrash. And you can start to see that being reflected in some of these values. The Gatecrash ones are a little more costly than the Return to Ravnica ones right now. But still, they are staying pretty steady. I mean, the most expensive one here is $12.98 for Sacred Foundry. That's really not that bad. I don't see Wizards printing these at Uncommon, like I said, they could do with the Pain Lands, just because I think there's just a little too much prestige around these, and they want to hold on to them a little bit, maybe bring them back in a few years when we go back to Ravnica. So I don't know. Quite honestly, I don't think we'll see these, but it's an interesting concept. All right, Filter Lands. This is an interesting one. This is a 10-land cycle, which I don't know if they'll be able to shoehorn into Modern Masters 2017, but you want to talk about 10 lands that really could use a reprint. These are certainly them. Let's take a closer look and see what's going on here. All right, these are from Eventide and Shadowmoor. Really awkward time for Wizards. Print runs were down. The States, we had a recession going on, so there are less players playing Magic at the time and buying packs actively. We also had a time period where they were having a hard time engaging new players. They were coming off the Time Spiral block, which was really popular among existing players, but was really complicated and confusing for new players. So a lot of people didn't jump onto Magic at that time. And because of that, you ended up with a land cycle that was really underprinted. And it does, some of these, I mean, do see play, but not to the level as, say, Pain Lands even, or definitely Fetch Lands or Shock Lands see, but they do see some amount of play. Having said that, let's look at these price tags though. Like, this is kind of crazy for some of these cards. I mean, the leaders are of course like Cascade Bluffs, $21.57, Fetid Heath, $25.26. We have Mystic Gate, $21.14. The big one, Twilight Mire at $34.62. And it kind of goes on from there. And Rugged Prairie, $20.57. Now the others are all under 20, but not much under 20. So other than Graven Carns, which actually was a reprint because it was printed in Future Sight first, and then this was kind of the full cycle flushed out where Future Sight was just teasing us. So that one's a little cheaper, but all the other ones really expensive at this point for what they do, quite honestly. They really could use a reprint. Now here's the awkward part. These do focus on hybrid mana, so you can't just kind of reprint these wherever you want. You have to find a time to do it with hybrid mana. I don't think this is going to be Modern Masters. I feel like hybrid mana is going to come back at some point, maybe in the not too distant future in a standard release, and I think we get these back. Now, that might not mean we're going back to Shadowmoor necessarily or Lorwyn, but I do think that they will want to use hybrid mana again, and if it's not a Ravnica block, for example, which I don't think it will be next time, then they might be thinking about saving these for that time period, and that's fine with me as long as they do get a reprint. All right, let's talk about some individual lands now. And now, most of these cards are seeing a lot of modern play, in some cases multiple decks. There's a couple on here I chose that honestly aren't seeing any modern play or very little modern play, but they have some decent price tags. I want to be sad to see them sneaked into the set. All right, let's begin with the first one. It's Academy Runes, $21.50. This was reprinted in the first Modern Masters, but not Modern Masters 2015. Big card in Lantern Control. Be really happy to see it come back again. As far as the set itself goes, yes, it does interact with artifacts, but I don't feel like your set has to be super artifact heavy for this to make sense to be in there either. Next, we have Bosaiju, who shelters all from Kamigawa. There's been some controversy recently around Kamigawa because some comments Mark Rosewater made it sound like they don't really have any interest in going back there ever or anytime soon, and that has disappointed a lot of people that do enjoy at least the flavor of that block. You could argue it wasn't a very well designed block, but the flavor was pretty cool. But anyway, this one $17.51. As he's playing ad nauseum, he's playing Vengeance decks, so it'd be nice to see a reprint. It was in a From the Vault a couple of years back, but even so, of course, we still need a legitimate reprint. Cavern of Souls. Okay, here's the big one. No messing around. This one needs to be in there. $54.99. It's never seen a reprint. It didn't even make it into an expedition. Don't know how that happened, but it didn't. So this card really needs to be somewhere. And Modern Masters, I think, is probably a decent place for it if it can't work its way into a standard set at some point. But regardless, I mean, this sees play in so many places. Bant Eldrazi, Elves, Amulet Titan. I mean, tribal decks are going to love this thing, right? No matter what tribe you're looking at. This is just an amazing card. Darksteel Citadel. You could argue this one probably doesn't really need a reprint. It was just a Modern Masters 2015. It's only 56 cents. It's been reprinted a lot of other places too, but the reason I included it simply was the fact that Affinity is just so popular right now. And we did see a strong artifact theme, actually in both Modern Masters 1 and 2. So I don't know if we'll see it again this time around. This one would surprise me, but I wouldn't be sad to see it show up at Common. Eldrazi Temple. This was in Modern Masters 2015. Right now, $7.50, even though it was reprinted there. Here's the thing, though, with this card. It's an uncommon, first off. Seeing tons of play right now. Decks like Bant Eldrazi, Eldrazi Tron, for example. But I don't think we're going to see it, because I think they went real heavy with Eldrazi in 2015. I don't think they're going to do that again. I mean, last time we got all three of the Eldrazi Titans from the original Zendikar block, and we just had Eldrazi all over the place. We had cards like this. Ayavugan was there, but yeah, I don't really think that's going to happen again. Obviously, Ayavugan won't happen again, but I don't think they'll retread that territory. But at some point, I don't know when, because again, it's Eldrazi-centric. It would be nice to get a reprint of this one. Flagstones of Trocaire, $16.98 from Time Spiral. I'll be honest with you, this doesn't see a lot of modern play. It does see a tad bit in some modern versions of Death and Taxes, but it's more of a legacy Death and Taxes deck. Again, though, because of the price tag, and it does see some marginal play in modern, I wouldn't mind seeing it show up. Gemstone Mine, $7.97 at this point, sees a lot of play in Ad Nauseam, Amulet Titan, even Boros Prison. So again, it's not super expensive, around $8 or so, but I wouldn't mind seeing it show up, and it could be a card that really helps with the mana fixing in this particular limited environment. Ghost Quarter, only $1.05 for this. It is uncommon, granted. You could argue it might not need a reprint at this point, and it's a card that you relatively easily could fit into and theme into a lot of different standard sets. So, I don't know, you probably don't need it here, but it does see a lot of modern play. I wanted to at least give it a mention. It's a great card to help protect yourself against some Blood Moon strategies, stuff like that. Glimmer Void, $26.92. This was in the first Modern Masters, not in the second one. Love to see this get reprinted again. It's a great, great card for Affinity, obviously. It also shows up in Lantern Control, though. So, due to the fact that it's in both those decks, yeah, it's got a pretty nice price tag on it. Grove of the Burn Willows. All right, so $49.92. I'll be honest with you, this isn't really seeing any modern play right now because, of course, Punishing Fire was banned a while back at this point. This still sees play in Vintage and Legacy, and you know what? $50 card, I wouldn't mind seeing it slid into the set, even if it's just for mana fixing purposes. Why not just find some additional value in some packs, right? So, granted, okay, it doesn't really pass the test for modern play, but I wouldn't be sad if it showed up. Horizon Canopy, $61.07. Alright, this is seeing a lot of modern play. I mean, Nightfall decks, Collected Company decks, Elves decks, Pure Steel Paladin decks, they're all running this card, and it really, really needs a reprint. It did get an Expedition. Obviously, that's not good enough to really quell the demand for this thing. It's a rare from Future Sight. Like I said, that was a downtime for print runs, and we really need another copy of this. Miko Koro's Center of the Sea, another Kamigawa block card, $12.65. Not a whole lot of modern play, but it does see some play in mono blue turns decks here and there. Minamo School at Water's Edge, $18.66 from Champions of Kamigawa. So we got a theme going with these Kamigawa lands. This one sees a lot of play, though, right now in Merfolk. Mirren the Moaning Well, $11.02. I'm just going to keep going with this Kamigawa block. This one saviors the Kamigawa, and okay, this is one that doesn't see modern play really, but this is a great commander card and see some legacy play. So again, $11. I wouldn't be sad to see it show up in the set. Mutavault, $10.34. This did get a reprint in Modern Masters 2014. Great card, though, for tribal decks. Obviously, you see this in Merfolk decks right now. 8-rack decks are running this too. Fairies decks. So it's showing up in a number of places. Nimbus Maze from Future Sight. This one's a little weird. $12.34. I feel like somebody went out and tried to buy a lot of these up a few months back, and that's part of the reason the price tag's where it's at. It spiked really hard, really for no reason, and I think someone's just speculating because Grove and Horizon Canopy are worth a lot of money that all Future Sight lands are going to be worth a lot of money. Here's the weird part, though. It does see a little bit of play in Modern, and it shows up sometimes in Azorius control decks. I mean, not all the time, but every once in a while. So, I mean, it does pass the test for seeing Modern play. So, because of that and the price tag, I threw it on here. A Buono Palace in the Clouds, $18.99 from Saviors of Kamigawa. These Kamigawa lands, like, quite honestly, I mean, they could use some reprints. So many of them either have never been reprinted or maybe just reprinted very limitedly. So there's a whole bunch of these on the list at this point. I wouldn't mind seeing. Maybe they can toss one or two of these in, have a light Merfolk theme or something like that in their limited game. Could be interesting. Scrying Sheets, $14.54 from Cold Snap. This is a rare that seeing play in those Scred Red decks. And Scred Red actually had a little bit of a surge, maybe 3-4 months ago. It's down a little bit now in the meta, but a lot of folks still playing it. This would be a great reprint. Speaking of Scred Red, Snow-Covered Mountains, $2.88. Now, okay, I don't know how they pull this off because Modern Masters, I mean, traditionally doesn't have basic lands in it. And if you replace the basic land spot with a foil, which is typically what they've done in the previous sets and what they're probably going to do with this set, because they have announced every pack will have a foil again. So there's no room to put the cycle of snow-covered lands or anything like that in there. Could you throw this in as a common, though? I don't know, maybe you could. If you did, you'd have to have a reason to do so from a limited point of view, which means you'd have to run cards that care about snow-covered mountains in this case. And if you did, I mean, maybe you could run a reprint of Scred or something like that, I suppose. But I don't know, it feels a little wonky when it comes to the limited game and draft. So it probably won't happen, but I wanted to still call this card out. It would be nice to get a cycle of these reprinted maybe in the future. I'm sure we're going to go to some snow world, even if it has nothing to do with Ice Age or Cold Snap, right? So at some point it'd be kind of nice to get these again. Next we have Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, $12.88 for the planar Chaos version. Although this was reprinted in Magic 2015, you can get that version a little bit cheaper, usually $9-10. But still, it'd be nice to get this one reprinted. It's seeing a lot of play in Modern right now between Eldrazi Tron decks and Nauseam decks and 8-rack decks. Velka the Molten Pinnacle, $8. This was from the original Zendikar. Here's the deal with this card in particular. A lot of the cards we've been talking about on these lists have become popular in the last maybe 6 months, 8 months or so. And you do have to consider that they probably were working on this set a year and a half ago, right? So you take that into consideration. That means a lot of the cards that we discuss might not have been on Wizards' radar at the time they were making the set. This card, however, has seen long-term play in Modern and continues to see play to this day. So there's maybe a good chance that, at the very least, this was on their radar at the time of creation of Modern Masters 2017. It sees play in decks like Titan Shift, Velcut Breach, and Scape Shift, for example. And finally, our last card, Vassula from Time Spiral, $14.52. Big card right now in Amulet Titan, so definitely would like to see a reprint of this one. Another card that's gotten pretty pricey over the years. Wow. So having said that, those are the cards we'd like to see reprinted in Modern Masters 2017. Now, I realize, especially when you're talking about lands, there's a limited amount of lands you're going to fit in there. They're not going to be able to hit all of these by any means, but these are at least just some thoughts of cards that, if some of these show up in Modern Masters 2017, I think they would be welcomed. We'd be happy to see them. And for the rest, hopefully they'll show up in other products going forward, whether those be standard releases, other supplemental products, maybe in Eternal Masters next year in some cases. They'd be welcome pretty much anywhere, right? So that is our last video where we're speculating on what we're hopefully going to see. Starting on Monday, official spoilers begin. We'll report out to you every day. We'll have a recap of spoilers, the values of the cards that they're reprinting. Are they cards we wanted to see? Cards maybe we don't care as much about, and what decks they see playing, that type of stuff. So we'll be talking about those, and then a couple weeks down the road, they'll reveal the whole set, and we'll kind of do a review of the limited game too. So until then, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.